I'm kind of assuming everyone can see my screen.
Yep.
Perfect. Well, I think we'll probably get started then. So welcome everyone to so we will be recording this session. Sorry, I was just reading the chat there. So I guess my name is Justin. I am with the Pre-Optometry Club. I'm VP of Finance this year. We will be recording this session, and we'll be if you want the link or access to it, you can email the club's email, and we'll be able to get it to you that way. But so I wrote my OAT this last summer, and so I'm going to be explaining the process of it, how it goes, what I did, tips and tricks, hopefully, and I'm really hoping this can help you guys out. We had this event last year with a student who's now in Pacific University, Chandler. I think some of you may have met her, and it helped me out a lot and learned a lot from it. And so if you're writing this upcoming year, please feel free to ask questions. If you want to, you can interrupt me or message me, and I will try to answer those questions as much as I can. How I've kind of organized it is I'll talk about my OAT, and then I will. If you have any questions after that, I have a slide that we will just answer some questions. I know for myself, I often forget my questions if I don't ask them right away. So that's why I'm doing that. And then I'll talk about the application to optometry school after. And so, so my name is Justin. Like I said, I'm in my third year here at the U of A. I'm doing a Bachelor of Science degree, majoring in biology, doing a minor in physical science. And as you can probably see, I like outdoor races and stuff. And I've been doing some Spartan races, not this year, but 2 years ago, I've been doing them. And I love being outside. And my interest in optometry actually started in my last year of high school. And I was thinking about optometry. We had a family friend who was an optometrist, so I talked to him a little bit. And then after high school, I took 2 years off, went and traveled a little bit, and then I came back to Canada and started here at the U of A, and been working on becoming an optometrist. And so I want to start with this quote because it's really good. And I think it's important to keep in mind when you write the OAT. And so we achieve more if we chase the dream instead of the competition. And the reason why I like that quote so much is because as I was studying, it's competitive to get into Waterloo. For those who don't know, Waterloo is the only English-speaking optometry school in Canada. So naturally, it makes it quite competitive to get in. And I was so concerned that I wasn't doing good enough, that I wouldn't get the mark on my OAT that I needed to get into Waterloo. And I was so concerned about that. I kind of forgot the dream is to become an optometrist. It doesn't really matter if you go to the States, whether you go to Canada, whether you go someplace else. As long as you achieve your goal, that's the main thing. The OAT, as long as you get a competitive score to get into a optometry school, there's many different paths to becoming an optometrist. And so it helped me, and I think it's important to keep that in mind. But so I don't know how much everyone knows, so I'll just start off with a basic introduction to the OATs. So the OAT stands for the Optometry Admissions Test, and if you want to apply to optometry school, it's one of the steps that you need to take. They usually require it, and if you take the OAT, you can apply to any optometry school in Canada, US, they also have Puerto Rico accepts OATs. And you take it at Prometric Center. So that's the company that distributes the test. And so there's one here in Calgary, or one in Calgary, one in Edmonton, and the one in Edmonton's over by West Edmonton Mall. And you go onto that website and they guide you to signing up for it. And it's pretty easy. It's if you follow the website and to sign up for it. But the OAT has different sections to it. So it has physics, biology, chemistry, OChem, quantitative reasoning, which is kind of like math, but not really. And then reading comprehension. And each one of those sections, you get a score. They score it weird. They score it out of 400. And so if you get roughly 50%, that'll equal about 300. You'll get a score. If you get 50% on that section, you get 300. And then it kind of depends on the section though. So OChem, usually it's a bit harder. So if you get 50%, it'll be about a 310. And where biology, it's a little bit easier. People do better on it. So if you get a 50%, that'll be 290 or whatever. And so you actually get marked each individually. In each section, you get a mark for it. And then your main reporting scores. So if you ever go look onto an optometry school and you look at their class profile, you'll see their AA score, which is academic average. So that's your overall, your full test. What was your score? And also your total science, which is your biology, chemistry, OChem, and physics. So they call it the natural science, which is the biology, chemistry, and OChem, and they clump those together in one group. And so you'll have, and those 4 different subjects make up your total science. And so those are your reporting scores that people, if you look on, like I said, class profile of optometry school, those are kind of the ones that you're looking at, trying to see what the university requires and what students are getting as they go into the university. And then most people, they register in around February to April. I registered end of April. And you tend to register early so that you can be able to get the day that you want in August, because it's first comes, first serve. So if that day is full, you can't register for it. And so you have to get a different day. But they do offer the OAT exams all year long. So it's not just restricted to August, September. If you want, you can write it in December, or if you want, you can write it in February. Doesn't matter too much. Yeah. And so for studying OAT, there's different resources available, and I just included a few. I was looking at different forums and stuff like that, and figuring out which was the best, and pros and cons to them. And these are seems to be some of the most popular ones that people go with. And so the OAT Destroyer, I never used that one. But if you do choose to use it, it costs around about $200, and you get a full length test, and you get questions after each chapter to practice, and you get to figure out kind of what aspects they're working on. And so that's the OAT Destroyer. Kaplan. So Kaplan's what I used. I actually bought this textbook, bought it brand new, and the textbook, the study book, it costs about $100. And with that, though, you get, if you buy it brand new, you get 2 full practice tests, and there's questions at the end of each chapter again, so you can practice like that. Though one thing I do like about Kaplan, if we're talking about cost, is that Kaplan does have sales that goes on. So I think I bought mine actually on a Black Friday sale, and I think it was only like $60. And so, whoops, where did I go? There we are. And so it's kind of nice that way that you can get it fairly cheap. And so you can also, I'm not sure, there's older versions of it, and my mindset was going is I wanted the newest version, and so I bought the book brand new. But actually, after looking into it, I kind of realized that there isn't too much difference between like the 2018, 2019, or 2017, 2018 versions. Pretty much the only difference will really just be cost, or not cost. There'll be like spelling mistakes or things like that they'll update, and if they made any mistakes or formatting things, there's not too much difference between the different textbooks. And then Kaplan also they actually have a question bank that I found really helpful. Costs about $100 again. I got it on sale for about $80. And pretty much what it is, they have 1,100, about 1,000 questions that you can just, from all the sections. And you can select how many questions you want from each section, and you can just practice them. And I found it really helpful. Especially because I learn by practicing lots. And so I really enjoyed that, because I could do, if I wanted to do like a mock quiz for my physics section, I could just click physics. I could select how many questions, which I think is about 40. And then I clicked, I want to be timed. And then I could press start and see how I would do on my physics section. And also, Kaplan does online courses. They are fairly expensive. I think they're around about $1,000 or something like that. But some people find them helpful. Some don't. I know if you do take them, you probably will get a better mark. Not sure how much better you can say. And I'll show you in the later slide, but a lot of the stuff that's already on the OAT, you actually taken in your university courses already. And so I never took the online courses, but some people do decide to. But what I did use a lot though was Chad's videos. And so Chad, he does videos for the DAT and the OAT, and they were super helpful. For the organic chemistry part, I'm not strong in organic chemistry, and I didn't take organic chemistry too. So they do test you on some of that stuff. And so I had to learn it all myself. And that was probably my weakest section, that I had to focus the most on that. And the thing I really like about Chad's videos was he goes through things and he's very precise. Like Khan Academy, I find they take a little bit of a while. Their videos are whatever, 9 minutes, 10 minutes, where Chad's videos are they're shorter. They're about 5 minutes, and he pretty much tells you directly to the point, which I really liked. And it's all free. And also you can get free sectional like practice tests. So he gives you questions about physics. He gives you questions about OChem, general chemistry, all of those, which I found really helpful. One of the nice things is because Kaplan and Chad's videos, they focus on slightly different things. And so it was nice to get a little bit of both. And I went to some other websites and just to figure out what questions are actually on it. And if people focus on different things, it'll hopefully you'll learn everything you need to. And then another common resource people use Crack the OAT. I didn't have time to get the prices on that or anything like that, but that's another option. And also some people use DAT books because the dentistry and optometry, their biology, general chemistry, and organic chemistry are really similar to each other. And so I actually used some practice tests from the DAT Bootcamp website, and they had free practice tests or sections that you can test on. And I just go around, and that's the nice thing about optometry is there's lots of websites that offer just free questions and things like that you can go for question of the day. And like Kaplan, even if you decide not to do Kaplan, they have a full practice test that you can do for free online. And so that's really nice just to figure out where you are. It's a different website that they'll just you get a different perspective on things that I really enjoyed. And then the last thing that was probably the most helpful resource was your ADA practice exam. And so it's kind of weird because a couple years ago they used to post it on the OAT website, and you could actually go on and click it, and it's supposed to be the most most realistic test, that if you get whatever you get on that is probably what you're going to get on your OAT. And I got exactly what it said on there on the ADA. But since I think in the last year, they've actually removed it off their website. And so I had to go hunting this summer, and I actually found a copy of it. And if you'd like a copy of it, I have my email address at the end that I'll share with you guys, and I can email you a PDF of it. And I found that's probably the best if you want to know what you're probably going to get into going into the exam. That's probably the best gauge to go by. And so studying, the Prometric and OAT website, they actually they say that they kind of recommend about 3 hours a day, 5 days a week for 3 months. I think it equates to about 150 to 180 hours of studying. And I'm not that smart, and so I had to study more. So I did about 3 hours a day for 6 weeks. And it's important to develop your own study plan, know kind of what you're good at and what you're strong at. And sometimes maybe you don't want to do 6 days a week. Maybe you want to just do the 5 days a week, which is fine. But what I did is I actually took a Excel sheet and I wrote, okay, I got week 1, week 2, and week 3 all the way up into my exam, and what chapters am I going to cover? And I just read a chapter a day. Like I said, I did Kaplan, and so I did a chapter a day, spent an hour reviewing, then did an hour of doing practice problems and other problems that I found online. And so everyone's study is a little different. So for bio, I recite my notes out loud. I'm sure my parents thought I was crazy all summer being with them and just hearing me mutter. But physics, I like to do practice problems, and quantitative reasoning, I like to do practice problems, and chemistry was a little bit of a mix. And it's, I actually have my book here, but the book is pretty thick. It's about 1,000 pages. And so it's kind of a lot to do, but as you get through it, you kind of realize, like I said, that you've been taught a lot of this stuff already. And so I'm not sure there's necessarily a best order to study the OAT, what sections to study with. I started with reading comprehension because it was the shortest. And so I just wanted to get it out of the way. And then I chose organic chemistry last, pretty much because I didn't take OChem 2. And so I wanted to save for that for the last. So I had to memorize. I just had to memorize it for a month. I didn't have to memorize it for 2 months. I didn't want to. Organic chemistry wasn't my strong suit. And so I wanted to spend the least amount of time. Like, I left enough time to make sure I did good on it, but I didn't want to be memorizing that for more than I had to, I guess I should say. And if you do choose Kaplan, or if you do the physics, or if you do the practice test on Kaplan, Kaplan is actually, the physics section is a lot harder than the real OAT. Like, I started doing my question bank and doing practice sectional tests for physics. And I think it took me about 3 times before I even finished on time. But then I was looking it up online, and everyone says that Kaplan physics is way harder than the actual real OAT. They don't really need to do as many calculations. So if you're doing Kaplan and you're getting bad scores on physics, it will improve. And Kaplan overall is harder than other ones. I think with the OAT Destroyer, Crack the OAT, usually that gets you about within 10 to 20 points of your actual score, where Kaplan, they actually say you can add about 40 to your score. So if you did a practice test on Kaplan and you got a 300, 310, or let's say a 300, you'd on your actual OAT, you'd be around 340 range. And I found that true on mine, that I was getting about 40. I got 40 on my Kaplan's test. On my real test, I got 40 more than I was doing on my Kaplan test. Yeah, so I included this slide because I think it's kind of interesting to, once you realize that it's like you got 1,000 pages, but when you look at it, if you take a lot of the prerequisites required for optometry school, like you have to take two introduction biology courses, and they actually cover a lot of the topics that you're actually going to be learning for your OAT. And your university classes will actually go way more in depth than you'll actually need to know for your OAT. And so, like I said, and this was one reason why it was a little bit hard for me for OChem, is because there's whatever 5-6 chapters on that you cover in Chem 263, 265, your OChem 2 course, your second OChem course. So I had to spend a little bit more time on it, but it's pretty, as I was going through, there's new stuff that you learn a little bit in each chapter, but the hard part with the OAT is that I found that it isn't necessarily you have to know everything super deep. Like your classes, you go into details about like the mechanisms in cells of how they replicate or things like that. And in the OAT, you actually don't need to know everything as much in detail. And so, but you have to be able to know everything, because you don't get to look at your notes and stuff. You have to be able to recall a large amount of information at the time of your test. And so that's the most tricky part about the OAT, is being able to recall that much information. So my test day, so I booked my test in end of April, beginning of May. And with COVID, one thing, they actually have a list on the Prometric website of centers that they have open. So mine, I booked for initially August 18th. And then about a week and a half before my test, I got an email saying your test is canceled. And it was because the Calgary center shut down. So I was kind of threw my plans for a loop. They didn't charge me extra. I got to rebook. And so I moved it up to Edmonton, because that was the next available time was September 5th. And so I had to, and I was coming up to Edmonton anyways for school. So I booked it in Edmonton, and then I wrote it then. But I know if you like, there's options to kind of get a tour of the test center, and where they go and they take you around. They show you, it's a computer-based test, so they'll show you the computers. They'll show you the computers are in a separate room, and so you can kind of get comfortable with it. It costs a little bit of money. I never did it because initially I was going to write in Calgary, and I live about 3 hours away from Calgary, so that was a lot of travel to go up to Calgary, do the little tour, then go home, and then go up for my OAT. And so I never did it, but it's an option. And when you arrive at the test center, you have to, with COVID, you have to wear a mask. You have to wear your mask, your full test. So your full 4.5 hours, you have to wear the mask. And then your test officially starts at 8 in the morning. But if you arrive early, they'll start early. So they say anytime they open at 7, you start at 8. So you can arrive anytime in between there, and they will they'll check you in. You have to have ID. They take pictures of you, make sure that you are the person who you say you are or who signed up for the test. And then, so I actually started mine around 7:30 because I was nervous for the test and I just wanted to get it done. So I went in a little early and they started me early. And so you have 4.5 hours to write the test. They have different sections. Like I said, they have a natural science section, which is your biology, general chemistry, and organic chemistry. And then they have your reading comprehension you do after that. And for each section, they have it timed. So you have a time limit for it. And then you have an optional half-hour break. And I would suggest taking the half hour. It's a long test, and it's good just to take a breath. They have a locker there that you can put your stuff in. So if you have a water bottle, they don't have any water fountains there. So bring a water bottle, bring some snacks that after that, you can actually go to your locker, get a drink. You can actually go out of the building if you want, get some fresh air. And then, so once you after your reading comprehension, you just click next, and they have a countdown on your screen, and you just leave your screen up, and then you can go and take your break. And so you can also during that break though, you're also allowed to you're allowed to go to your locker, and you're actually allowed to look at your notes. And so after your break, your next 2 sections are physics and quantitative reasoning. And so you can actually, what I did was I went to my locker. I had my formula sheet for physics, and there was a couple formulas that I knew that I was actually I didn't quite know as well, because there's quite a few formulas. And so what I did is I kind of looked at those, memorized those, and then I went in a little early, went back in and I wrote them down. They have some scrap paper they provide, and so I wrote down those formulas before I ended my break, so that way they were there. I didn't have to worry about them. And and then I went and did my test. And I found that physics, like I said, is way harder with Kaplan. Physics was quite a bit easier than Kaplan. The organic chemistry I found was about the same as Kaplan. It was really good. General chemistry I found a little bit harder. Bio was about the same. And the thing with bio was you'll always get kind of random questions that you didn't study about, because there's just so many things they can test you on. And so there was some questions that I had no idea what it was, or I don't think I even read about it in Kaplan textbook. But usually from the you can pick up clues from the question, and you give it your best shot at it. And then reading comprehension was my worst, actually, that I did on my test, because I didn't study for it. I thought I'd be fine, and I still did good on it. But reading comprehension was my worst. And then quantitative reasoning was actually I did all right in. It's similar to math, and they do a lot of different probability calculations, etc., like that. And so I did all right in that I was happy with. Yeah. And I guess before we get in the applications, are there any questions about the OAT that anyone has?
I just had a quick question about taking the second OChem. Do you wish that you took the second OChem? Would it have been a lot more helpful, or are you glad that you didn't take it? Because I'm kind of debating whether I want to take the second OChem next semester.
It'll definitely help. It isn't the end of the world if you don't. I had to spend a lot of time studying for it though, but it will help. You do a lot of different reactions with like aldehydes and ketones that inorganic chemistry 1 you don't do. And so if you do it, it'll help.
Okay, thank you.
And then just from the chat, Brian's asked if everything memorized, nor formula sheet, calculators, etc. I guess I didn't explain that. So for your physics section, you actually don't get a calculator. The good thing about that though is everything you do in physics is you can do it in your head. It's not going to be complicated. It's not going to be complicated because usually in like your physics course at university, they say you got to use 8.99 times 10 to the power 5, where there they'll just say 9 times 10 to the power 5. They expect you to round. They don't expect you to get the exact in. And also their answers will be, they won't be like 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. It'll be like 1, 4, 9, and 12. Like there's big enough gaps between them so that when you do estimate them and round them, that you'll get pretty close to the actual answer. And so you do then you get a calculator for your quantitative reasoning. They do warn you, like in your prep though, that you can't rely too heavily on the calculator. It's an on-screen calculator, so you don't actually have it physically with you. So it takes a little while to move your mouse and click 9.36 and go around. So they recommend you using it sparingly. And for a lot of it, you can round and get pretty good within a pretty good range of what it is. And then, so you only get a calculator for quantitative reasoning. And then for your natural sciences, you get a periodic table so that you can see what elements are, or where they are on the table, etc. Then in the chat also, if you could go back in time, what are some things you would change about the way I studied? That's a good question. I think actually the one thing I would change is I studied pretty hard. I would actually focus on taking a little bit breaks in between, because I burnt out about 2 or 3 times over the summer. And when you burn out, it's usually it took me I had to take a couple days off afterwards just to kind of recover, get my mind wrapped around things. And so it's definitely a marathon when you study, and so it's important to take breaks throughout. Like when my exam got canceled, that really bummed me out, and so I actually I had to I took a couple days off just to figure things out and just to kind of relax a bit. I had a little bit more time, and like you have to spend a lot of time studying, but at the same time, don't be afraid to take breaks on your weekends. Take some weekends to go places, and you can still do some fun stuff over the summer. And yeah, I hope that answered your question. But is there any other questions that anyone has?
Sorry, yeah, just a quick question for Justin. So the periodic table, then I assume it was just the elements. It didn't have any information or extra data on there for you, like oxidation numbers
Nope.
or it's just the elements, so you know where they are, and then
Yeah, it's
okay.
Elements, and you get their molecular weight. If
Okay.
they ask
Okay.
you for oxidation or things like that, usually they'll give you a table and they'll ask you about it. So if they ask you any questions about that, they'll give you a table in the question so that you have the information to do. But
Okay.
I think I only came across one question like that where they actually gave me a table and they said, what's the reduction potential of these compounds or this reaction?
Okay. Perfect. Thank Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
What was the reading comp, like articles or stories, or like what kind of thing was it? Was it articles or like stories like in English class?
No, so they're much easier than English class. I was grateful for that. They don't ask you what's the mood of this scene, or they don't ask you like how do you
Those are the worst.
interpretate this. They don't ask you that stuff. Like what most of them are science articles. So they'll talk about I think I did a practice one about the history of I think it was like magnetic fields in chemistry and how they used them, like NMR, et cetera, like that. And so they're mostly factual. So they'll say like who discovered this or who used this idea, and then they'll also have some. They do have some. The only like the most Englishy questions you'll get is they'll say which statement would the author agree to the most. But usually those are not that hard. They're usually there's usually sentences like at the conclusion paragraph that'll help you kind of with those questions, and usually they state their point of the article, and so usually they're around like about 12 paragraphs, and so you have 3 different readings to do, and then you answer questions about them.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Well, if there's no other questions, I guess we'll keep going on. Yeah, so for the applications, I've only applied to the University of Waterloo this year. I didn't apply to any of the state schools, mainly because I'm going to apply for Waterloo this year. If I don't get in, I'm going to apply next year, and then I still have 1 more year of my undergrad. But just with, I thought it's worth mentioning with COVID-19, a lot of things are changing and up in the air. Almost, I haven't looked at all, so I won't say all universities, but every university that I looked up to for optometry school, they're accepting credit, no credit for winter 2020. They realized that a lot of things happened and a lot of schools went to that, so they're perfectly fine with that. They're also accepting, I know for sure for Waterloo's accepting for fall 2020, they're accepting online labs that they don't have to be in person. And with all the COVID-19 things happening, like job shadowing, I know will be a big one that's impacted. It's like, how are we supposed to get into clinics when with the pandemic going on and things like that? And a lot of the universities do have a page about COVID updates, but if you do ever have any questions, just feel free to ask them. I've done that with Waterloo a little bit, and I've done it with asked some questions to some other universities, and they work with you really well. They're universities, they understand that things are hard right now, and they're trying to adapt for students, and with all the different universities and what they're doing. So the application process. So after you write your OAT, you have to start your applications. For Waterloo, the applications are due usually at the beginning of October, and so I only had about a month or so. So I had to kind of need to get it on it really quickly. If you're applying to the US, those can take a little bit longer. They actually don't have a firm deadline. For the US, it's more rolling admissions, so that they'll keep accepting people until they're full, and once they're full, they're full. And so where Waterloo, they actually have a specific, this year it was October 2nd, and then for Waterloo, and I've actually found some state schools you have to take a Casper test, and Casper is a ethics test. And I'll talk a little bit more about the Casper test and the Casper snapshot later on. And then for the U.S. universities, use for Waterloo, you go to the website, and they give you an account to apply for it on the Waterloo's university website, where we are, where US use a platform called Optimcast, and you can apply things there, and they have you write out. I'm just getting this from other presentations that I've seen of students. You have to write out things like why you want to be an optometrist, some short essays, and for both whether you go to Waterloo or the US, you have to punch in all your grades for all your classes, and they ask for awards and things like that. And so my suggestions for Waterloo is to start early. It takes a little time, especially I'm not from Edmonton, and I moved back up to Edmonton for school because I had an in-person lab, and I had to talk to my mom a lot because things like any awards, they asked if you have an award. I took a picture of it and then uploaded it as a PDF, so that was my proof. And so I had to ask my mom for that. And so just by the time I asked my parents to get that, they found it, they send it, I upload it and things. It takes a little bit of time. So be aware of the deadlines and when you have to get everything done by. They ask you to input your grades, which takes a while. The transcripts, I know for Waterloo, this was one thing that I didn't know. I actually was talking to Chandler's student at Pacific University right now studying optometry. And she that was her first thing she mentioned. She's like, you actually have to send a transcript to Waterloo. And so by the time you send a request to the U of A, and by the time the U of A process it, they send it in the mail. By the time it gets to the mail, then it gets over to Waterloo. And then by the time the Waterloo, it gets to the optometry application and committee or people, it takes a little while. So that's one thing I would say for sure, get on right away. And then you also have to upload one on your online application too. So you have to request one sent to you, one to send to Waterloo, and then they just take a little bit of while. And they also ask you to upload any awards, academic, non-academic awards since high school too. And if you have a picture or certificate or a plaque, I just took a picture and then uploaded it there. They also ask you to volunteer experience. If you've volunteered with U of A club, so pre-optometry club, you can include that. You can any other clubs, any other things you do. It's good to try to be involved in some other extra or volunteer activities. That way, it helps that you're not shows that you're actually trying to give back to your community, help other people, and that you're a good person in general. And the other thing that with all optometry schools, you need reference letters. And so for Waterloo, they require two, one from an optometrist and one from a non-relative. And then some US universities actually require three. And the third one is actually from a professor. And you'd actually need to, they actually specify what type of professor. So I think the one university I looked at, it was a science professor. It was Tennessee, the Southern College of Optometry. And they don't want an English professor or an arts professor. They specifically said a science professor. And so that's one thing to be mindful of and just to be able to go to the office hours of your professors. And that's kind of what I did is I ended up, I would go to office hours and just start talking to the professor. And if the professor was nice, I would keep going back and try to develop a relationship with him. And then ask the question and be like, hey, would you be willing in the future? I'm applying for optometry. Would you be willing to do an application, and some said yes. And that's kind of how I got to know the professors, is by doing that. And some other requirements. You also have to have prerequisite courses. I didn't make a list of them because they vary a little bit with school, and so it's best suggestion is just to go online to and look at the university you're wanting to see and see what they require. I know for popular ones is Waterloo and Pacific. They tend to be the most popular. And Waterloo, I think a unique one, Waterloo requires the most prerequisites out of any optometry school. And they require a healthcare ethics course, and Pacific requires an anatomy course that most other optometry schools don't require. And so it's just it's important to just go on, look, and make sure you have all those prerequisites done. And I kind of mentioned it before, extracurricular activities. So if you volunteer, things like that. And they also, it's good just to keep track of your hours, because they do ask you how many hours you've done. And so it's good just to keep track of them, and then you can have an accurate, that you're being truthful, that you're not, and it's good to know how many you've been done. So job shadowing, most universities do require job shadowing. With COVID-19, I think the best advice I have is just email the university and see if they're still requiring it if you don't have the job shadowing, because I've talked to some optometrists. The optometrists that I've job shadowed, they've said, and I totally understand, they said that they don't want any extra people in the clinic, because more people, the more chances of the patients getting infected, etc. And so it's usually the requirement for job shadowing is really low, but I'm sure there's universities who are willing to work with you and be able to, if you haven't got those, they might waive it. And it's just talk to the university with that. Other things to kind of help fill that gap is if you can find a job at a clinic. I know that helps a lot. Being able to be in a clinic, being able to have that exposure to optometry client or patients, and also optometrists, and learn what they're doing. And you might, if you want to try, I've never done it before, but maybe trying it virtually if you want to try to get job shadowing hours that way. You could see if the optometrist is willing to do it virtually. Or another option that I think that's just as good as job shadowing is if you ask the optometrist, just, hey, I know it's probably not a good idea to be in there with patients, but is there a time where you have like an hour gap that I could possibly come into the clinic and be able to ask you questions about the equipment, about what optometry is, how pros and cons of optometry, and you're be able to go into the clinic and be able to talk to them. And even though you aren't watching them see patients, you're still very much engaging with the optometrist and learning more about the profession. And I think that's probably just as good as job shadowing, is being able to learn from them. And then Casper test. And so the Casper test, like I said, is an ethics test. And so it's kind of, it's a weird test. One of the reasons why it's weird is you never find out how well you did on it. They take your score. All you know is they have different people mark each section, and they send the score to the university, and you never find out how you do. And so what they do is they give you about 10 seconds to see your role. So they'll say, you are the boss, you are a friend, you're a coworker. And then they'll give you a little short blurb to read or a video clip. And then they give you 30 seconds to think about it. And then you have 5 minutes to answer 12 questions. And there's 12 scenarios with a 10-minute break in between. And so I'm not an English person. And so it was little weird. Some of the questions they ask, just because they're kind of hard and awkward. Like one of the practice ones that I did was there was a coworker, his wife was having a child, and he was going to take some time off, but there's a big promotion at work, and his boss doesn't really want him to take time off. And so he's like, well, what should I do? Should I like spend time with my wife, or like should I stay and get the promotion for a job? And so you have to comment on it, give him advice. And some general tips for that I found. I just kind of Google this stuff. Like I said, you don't ever see your scores, so I still think they're pretty good advice, though, is in the scenarios, they don't ever give you all the details. So it's important not to jump to conclusions. That if they say like, oh, you see a guy walking on a street like he's drunk, or well, you don't know if he's drunk. He may have a medical condition that has dementia and doesn't actually know where he is. And so then you can kind of use if-then statements. So you said, if after talking to this person, I find out this is actually what's happening, then I would do this. Or this other scenario, then I would do this. And so if after asking and finding out that I'm cool, then you might be friends with me. Who knows? And then you try to choose a response that maximizes the well-being of everyone. If something could possibly hurt someone or diminish their well-being, then choose the choice that benefits the most people, pretty much, which is makes a lot of sense. And then the other thing is they'll often ask you about like you're a boss or you're in a group, and always talk to people in private. So if they give you the scenario that you're in a group and the one person is slacking off, it doesn't hurt just to say, yeah, after our group meeting, I would go and pull this person aside in private and ask them if there's anything wrong or if there's anything I can help them with. And that way, it's just showing that you're professional, that you're not trying to embarrass people in front of other people, that you're sensitive to individuals' needs, etc. And then I kind of skipped this last one, but Casper snapshot. So this is actually new with COVID. I'm not exactly sure. The idea behind it is that it's going to replace interviews. I don't know, as of right now, I know Waterloo's still planning on doing in-person interviews, but I think they make that final decision in November. And so what the Casper snapshot, it's supposed to be like a snapshot of you. And so they ask you a couple questions, just like why you want to be, they differ for everyone. I think mine were like, why you want to be an optometrist. If there's one part of the application that you think should have more weight to it, what would it be? And you just get 2-3 minutes, and you just record yourself on your webcam and you answer it. And it's pretty simple. It's not anything crazy, and like I said, they're doing that. Whether it'll actually replace interviews or not, I'm not sure. We'll find out pretty quick, though. Yeah, and that's my application and OAT experience. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. That's my email address. Just a reminder that if you would like that practice test, I can just shoot me an email and I can email it to you guys. And if there's any other questions, be happy to try to answer them.
Did you do any like prep books for the Casper, or did you just like search up online like questions?
I didn't do any prep for the Casper. I did actually. They do a mock. Well, they have a practice test on the Casper website. There are Casper textbooks and stuff, but that's probably just me. I don't know if it's worth it because you never see your mark. So I don't know if they probably have good guidelines and stuff, but if you look online, I don't know. It could be just as good advice as reading a textbook or anything like that. And then, so in the chat, they have, what is the weighting between your GPA and your OAT score for admission? I'm actually not sure. Weight more. I think they weight the your OAT score a little bit more because different universities, some universities are harder than others, and so by having your OAT score really is the same for everyone. So it's a standardized test that it can really tell you, even though someone has a 3.8 GPA and someone has a 3.5, they may actually get the same score on their OAT. And so I think it's a good, I think they focus a little bit more on that. I actually know the Canadian education system is a lot better than the Americans. So I actually know if you go to the US, they'll actually, they'll take like a Canadian student, like if you have a Canadian student at a 3.5 and an American student at 3.5, because the Canadian system is harder, they'll actually, it's that 3.5, it's like it's a 3.6 or 3.7. And they'll actually, if all other things are the same, they take the Canadian students just because our education system is harder than the US. Hope that answered your question. And then, yeah.
Sorry, what about, would you ever consider rewriting the OAT? Because you can write it more than once, correct? Or one and done, stress is there, stress is gone, you're happy with your score. Would you consider studying some more and trying to improve your score?
So I got a good enough score that I was happy with my score. I'm not going to do it. The thing with the OAT is it costs about $700 to rewrite it. And so it's, if you want to save there's nothing wrong with rewriting again. It's expensive to write though. And so it's, if you get below, most universities actually have a threshold. Usually it's pretty easy. It's like if you get a 310, 320, some universities, even you just have to get a 300 to apply. But if you get like a 290 or anything like that, you'll definitely want to rewrite that because most schools won't accept anything below a 300.
Thank you.
Do you know what the competitive score for the OAT is for Waterloo? Like what range they're looking for?
380. So
Thanks.
Waterloo is the most competitive with 380. Most US schools, you're looking around at 340. 340, 360 would be a really good score for a US school. Yeah, I think they always have the average on the optometry class profile for the university. And if you go on, they'll have your average. Most of them range around from 320 to about 340, 350. And so if you get, for the US schools, if you get a 360 or 370, that's really competitive for there. Waterloo, it doesn't mean you're out of the running. I know people who've gotten some low scores, like 360 or whatever, and still made it into Waterloo. But it's just slightly below the average. Well, if there's no other questions, or if you do have questions in the future, please email me. I've done it to some of my friends who have done optometry school, and there's little tips and little tricks that just makes life easier. And don't be afraid to reach out to me. I'm that's one thing I love about the pre-optometry club and optometry in general is that we're wanting to help each other out. We're it's not so competitive that we're trying to push you down to get us up. It's if you get in, it's just as good as me getting in. And so thank you so much for all coming out tonight, and hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.